Hello there, good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with Louise, Minchin and John Kay.
Yeah, let's take you back to our top story this morning. After another challenging year, students across the UK will receive their A-level, Highers and BTEC results later this morning, with grades awarded based on teacher estimates.
It's a big moment in many households. We're thinking of you today, and we're joined now from Westminster by the Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson. Good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. Reports this morning, we'll get the precise data later, but reports this morning that very nearly half the students who took A-levels will get either an A or an A star today. Are you happy with that? Is that right?
Well, first of all, I'm sure you'd want to join us in this, but really congratulating all the students who've worked so incredibly hard. And as you yourself said, in quite exceptional times as well, and worked so incredibly hard to get their grades. And in an hour's time, hundreds of thousands of youngsters up and down the country will be opening their results and seeing what they've got. And we should be celebrating that, because there has been so much work that has gone into this. But let us not forget, this is a truly exceptional year. This cohort of students have had to deal with a level of disruption that no one has ever seen before, not even during a world war, as a result of this pandemic. And it's right that we take the unprecedented steps in order to be able to ensure that they can take the next step on in their careers and their lives, whether that's to university, whether that's into an apprenticeship, work, or a higher technical qualification.
But, I mean, I totally understand what you're saying there. I mean, every parent, grandparent knows what these kids have been through over the last 18 months. It's been awful. And nobody will decry them their results today. They've all handled things incredibly well. But grade inflation on this level is unlike anything we've seen before. And what about the kids who take exams next year? They've also been disrupted. They've also had these challenges. Will they also get a hike because they've been through this?
So I think you raise a really important point. I mean, we do expect students to be getting better grades this year than maybe in previous years. But, it's very difficult to compare the experience that students have been through this year to the experience that students have had in many previous years before. But what we set out, and we set it out actually in the last academic year, a process of returning back to normality. Next year we very much hope to be taking that important step of returning back to examinations. We also set out what mitigations that we're looking at putting in place. But we do also recognise that youngsters next year will have faced disruption in terms of their education, hopefully substantially less disruption than this cohort of youngsters. But we do recognise that. That's why we've outlined a set of mitigations for examinations next year, and we're wanting to create a sort of a glide path and return back to normality, but recognising that students have been impacted by this, and it isn't just this year that's been impacted, and that's why we need to manage that return back to normality for all students.
You're making it sound like it's all been planned and managed impeccably. Your critics say it's been a complete disaster. The Institute for Government came out with a report a couple of days ago and said you have failed students because you didn't plan properly for the eventuality that there would be a second wave and that exams would have to be cancelled this year, that you would be getting a fail today.
Well, actually, sadly, that report was both inaccurate and it was misleading, because we'd already undergone sort of contingency planning all the way through that autumn term in the run-up to Christmas. We had actually set out our plans for return to exams in 2021, but we had also, as part of that, done the internal planning in order to be able to, recognising the fact that the pandemic can take many different turns.
Sure, but I think the point that report made was that the autumn was far too late to be doing that, to be making those changes. You should have been predicting or at least planning for a second wave months before that, this time last year.
So of course we had run the process of teacher centre assessed grades last year. We'd obviously learnt a lot of experiences as a result of doing that. So our policy approach to actually having a contingency plan was, as you've seen this year, is completely different to last year, and it would have been wrong not to have learnt the lessons from last year in terms of our planning, that if we weren't in a position to be able to proceed with exams, to then do an absolute carbon copy of what we did last year, because I personally didn't think it served students well enough. That's why I apologised personally for that. So we wanted to very much learn the lessons from last year and make sure that we had a system that worked better for students and worked better for schools as well. So, it seems odd, an idea is that you don't learn the lessons of actually how you can improve a system or how you have a better approach. So when we were in that awful situation, and I'm sure you remember it well, where we had to say to schools that they weren't going to be able to run classes normally like we want to see schools running classes, but actually we're having to close the doors to so many students. We were ready literally after that announcement to give a clear direction of the approach that we were taking, and then launch a major consultation straight after that in order to give people the opportunity to have their say, but also give a clarity and a directions to what we're going to do.
OK, for those students getting their results today and now thinking about the next stage and college and university, we've heard from a lot of them that they're really worried that when they get there, they're going to be stuck in their rooms again, on computers again, doing online learning, not having face-to-face lectures, anything like enough. And they're saying, look, if I can go night clubbing now and I can go to the pub with my mate, why on earth can't universities be forced to teach us face-to-face? Are you going to force universities to do that?
Well, we've been absolutely clear with universities that it's absolutely safe and okay to do face-to-face teaching, whether that's tutorials and lectures. I want to see that happen in universities. I don't have as many direct powers over universities as we do over schools, but the Office for Students, which is the regulator, is clear that we want to have high-quality teaching. And for me, a key element of high-quality teaching is about being in the lecture theatre, being with your peers, the socialising and the discussion that goes on there. And of course, we've all discovered we can do so much of this on sort of Teams and Zoom, but there's nothing like being there in person. So yes, I do want to see that returned. I'll be asking the OFS to put as much pressure on universities to bring back full face-to-face teaching. That's what students want. And I don't think we should be naive about this. I think that if you don't have face-to-face teaching in the lecture theatre, I'm very old now, but I can just about remember my student days. There does tend to be a little bit of mingling and socialising outside of a lecture theatre as well. I'm not sure if you recall that.
Universities could have a bit of a credibility problem, couldn't they, if they don't do more face-to-face lectures and teaching? Because students are going to say, well, look, what am I paying for? Thousands and thousands of pounds. I need to have that face-to-face experience. If you care as much about these young people and think they deserve to be rewarded for what they've been through after the last 18 months, it's all right you asking universities to do this, but they're going to say, what are you going to do about it?
Well, this is why we've asked the regulator to look at the quality of teaching as a manifesto commitment. It's something that we're absolutely clear on. We've got to make sure that we have high quality teaching in universities. A key element of that is always going to be face-to-face. This is why the regulator, the OFS, does have some of those powers to put the pressure on universities to get back to face-to-face lectures. That's what we want to see across institutions right across the land. Universities are very safe places to be. They take their health and safety incredibly seriously, and I think that as we get students fully back into universities in September or October, we want to see them back in the lecture theatre as well as just on campus.
These bumper results today mean there are going to be record numbers of students turning up at universities in September and October, and there are real concerns among a lot of young people and their parents that these unis aren't going to be able to cope with these people. They're not going to have the the right accommodation, not enough space for them, that it could be real chaos next month. What can you do? What are you doing to make sure that doesn't happen?
Well, we're already working very closely with the university sector, and if I can take the opportunity to thank them, so many students coming through, and we're going to have a bumper year this year because we've got a big demographic bulge of more students who are going to be, of that age where they can go to university. And we always see every year, and every year the BBC covers it, the real competition there is to get into the best universities. But we've already taken some action. There's always pressure on medical places. That's why we've increased the number of medical places. Just a few years ago, that sat at 6,000 places each academic year. We've grown that to closer to 8,500 for this year. We've put in extra money, an extra £10 million for universities to increase the number of high quality, more expensive courses that are often in most demand for students, because we want to be able to do as much as we can do to accommodate students into the system.
But all those extra students, that can only mean it's going to be more difficult. Life on campus is going to be more difficult. There's not going to be enough space. There's 20, 30, 40 teaching. It's not going to be the student experience that lots of people might remember from the past because of the way the results work today.
Well, I think that universities have demonstrated an amazing ability to deliver a really high quality university experience. They have had to be flexible, and they will. I'm sure they'll be going to great lengths this year in order to be able to accommodate those students. But universities have grown their capacity over the last few years. There's a growth in capacity coming into this year as well, and we're confident that the student experience is going to be an ever better student experience. But universities have been working so hard to accommodate those students and make sure that they have the opportunities to take that next step in life. But it's really important also to recognise that there's so many students who won't be going down that route of, finishing their A-levels or technical and vocational qualifications and going straight on to university. There's so many other brilliant routes to choose from, whether that's high quality apprenticeships, which deliver so much, and actually sometimes for a lot of youngsters deliver better results in terms of better earnings for them, earning while they learn, but also higher technical qualifications in colleges, and different routes can also be taken. So we do need to get out of a habit of thinking university is just the one and only route that young people can go down.
Maybe because they're going to be so crowded. While we've got you here, can I just ask you about another story we're covering shortly on the programme this morning? A campaign by a lot of senior people, medics and people in sport, trying to get mandatory defibrillators installed in all schools, not just new and refurbished schools, but every school should have defibrillators to stop kids having heart problems. Will you support that? Will you insist that that happens?
Well, I know how important defibrillators are, and having been involved right across my constituency of South Staffordshire, sort of seeing the amazing work that communities have done in installing defibrillators, how it can actually save lives. And I'd be really happy to meet with them to discuss their campaign and what they're looking and aiming to do.
I'm sure they'd love a meeting. They'd love even more for it actually to happen. Will it happen?
Well, it's best to sort of sit down with them, discuss what their plans are, what they'd like to see, and have that sort of discussion with them. And that my door is always open, and love to have the opportunity to speak with them.
OK, Gavin Williamson, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll be talking more about defibrillators in school a little bit later. We are still, because we don't want to let it go yet, do we, really, celebrating the Olympics here on BBC Breakfast. Sally, you got another wonderful game.
Keely Hodgkinson, who became one of the standout stars for Team GB in Tokyo in the 800 metres. Not only that, she broke a 26-year-old British record
in the Western Isles. Stay with us. The headlines are coming up next.
It could be another season to savour.
Saturday at 10:20.
The source of all life, molecule. H2O, the molecule that made us. Coming.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with Louise, Minchin and John Kay.
Our headlines for you this morning.
Yeah, everyone here is poised, waiting for those grades. It's been a difficult journey, and the students are hoping that anxiety will turn to relief when they get their results in around half an hour.
Good morning from Bolton. It is a big day for those in vocational training. They've been studying
catering, computing, business, sports,
health and social care.
How has that practical training worked over a lockdown, and why are these courses proving more popular than A-levels? On Evia, the country's second largest island.
We have got more Olympic medals for you this morning. We just heard from Keely Hodgkinson. Next up, it's the brilliant Gadirova twins who won bronze for Britain in the team gymnastics.
Good morning to you. It's a Tuesday, the 10th of August. Hundreds of thousands of students will receive their A-level results today, and high grades are expected across England, Wales and Northern Ireland.
That is because for a second year, results have been based mainly on teachers' assessments after the exams were cancelled because of the pandemic. Vocational BTEC results also out today, and higher and national grades in Scotland will be confirmed. Here's our education correspondent, Elaine Dunkley.
These A-level results marks the end of the most challenging year for thousands of students. In January, traditional exams were scrapped and replaced with teacher-assessed grades. In Loughborough, Shivani and Finn say dealing with the disruption, constant assessments and the fear that their grades are not seen as valid has been tough.
That does add more stress for me than I think an exam would, because with an exam it's sort of like you take it in one sitting and that's it, and you can't go back to it. And
that's a real concern, but ultimately in the circumstances that have prevailed.
On what they have been taught, the pandemic has also put pressure on teachers who need to provide evidence for every grade that has been awarded.
The teachers themselves had to do that marking and then feed that marking into the grading meetings. The grading meetings were a significant unit of work in themselves, hours of meetings discussing grades, grade boundaries and students and their individual circumstances.
The sample of their grades checked by exam boards. It's expected that those receiving top grades will be significantly higher than in previous years.
Had to deal with a level of disruption that no one has ever seen before.
The pandemic has been a test on many levels. Elaine Dunkley, BBC News in Loughborough.
Some students, but in the last half hour, the Education Secretary Gavin Williamson has told us about his aim to get university students back into the classroom once they get there after getting their results. He wants that to change in the coming academic year. Let's speak now to our chief political correspondent, Adam Fleming. Adam, a lot of students campaigning for this because basically they're just fed up of doing it all online.
Yeah, and also lots of students this morning, although not all of them getting their A-level results, and the next step will be going to university and wondering what the university experience will be like after people going to uni last September and October found that they did lots of lectures on their laptops. They were confined to their halls, and it was not the university experience they were expecting, but it still came with the same cost you'd get for the normal university experience. So this morning, the Education Secretary Gavin Williamson has been sending quite a strong message to universities about what they should be providing when students come back. But as you'll hear in this clip, sending a strong message is kind of all he can actually do. It'll be a case of seeing what happens when students go back, and then what do students do about it when they potentially complain to the regulator? What can the regulator do about it? And then does the government come under pressure to try and give themselves more powers to see what they can do about the situation? Although, of course, everything could turn out to be pretty okay. Also, what's interesting, looking forward to next year's exams, which might seem a bit strange on the day we're just getting the results of this year's, is that officials in the Department for Education and ministers and schools and exam bodies are looking at what to do next year, because they know that students sitting exams in a year's time will have been just as affected by the pandemic as people sitting them this year and last year. And chatting to people at the Department for Education, they say that disruption is going to have to be something that they take into account for years and years and years into the future. So there will not be a normal exam results day for quite some time yet.
OK. Cheers, Adam. Thanks for that.